Most men who rode into the American West believed winter was just another season. They carried guns. They carried confidence. Some carried dreams. But winter carried something else. It did not fight them. It waited. And when the snow finally fell, it killed more men than bullets ever did. Tonight, you will hear how a few cowboys survived the brutal winters that erased almost everyone else. Not through strength, but through silence, patience, and the art of staying alive. When winter ruled the West. How cowboys survived brutal winters that killed most men. Most men who came to the American West believed winter was something they could endure. They believed cold was temporary. They believed courage was enough. They were wrong. Winter on the frontier was not a challenge. It was a sentence. It arrived quietly, often without warning, stretching across the plains like a living thing. Snow fell sideways in the wind. Temperatures dropped so low that breath turned to ice before it left the mouth. And once winter settled in, escape was no longer possible. Towns disappeared beneath white silence. Trails vanished overnight. Men froze while walking just a few hundred yards from shelter. History remembers the West as loud and violent. Gunshots. Horses. Shouting men. But winter erased all sound. In winter, the West was silent. And silence was deadly. This is the story of how cowboys survived that silence. While most men did not. The men who did not last. In the mid to late 1800s, thousands of men poured into the American frontier. Some came for land. Some for cattle. Some were running from past lives they could not outrun. They arrived with optimism. And optimism was often the first thing winter destroyed. Many of these men had never experienced true cold. They came from the East. From Europe. From places where winter was uncomfortable, but manageable. The Great Plains were different. Here, the land offered no mercy. There were no forests thick enough to block the wind. No mountains to slow the storms. Just open space, endless and exposed. When winter winds came down from Canada, nothing stopped them. They ripped across the plains for hundreds of miles without losing strength. Men learned quickly that distance meant nothing in winter. You could see shelter and still never reach it. Those who failed to understand this rarely survived their first season. The first great lesson: winter is not your enemy, panic is. Cowboys who survived learned something early. Winter did not kill quickly. Panic did. The men who died first were often the strongest. The loudest. The most confident. They believed movement meant safety. They believed speed meant survival. In blizzards, they walked. They rode horses until animals collapsed beneath them. They pushed forward when the land demanded stillness. And winter punished them for it. Cowboys who survived did the opposite. They stopped. They waited. They listened. Stillness became their greatest skill. Why cowboys were different? Cowboys were not special because they were braver. They were different because they lived closer to the land. Most cowboys did not own land. They did not have solid homes. They followed cattle across open country for months at a time. This forced them to learn the language of weather. They watched clouds. They listened to wind. They felt temperature changes through their bones. They learned that winter announced itself long before snow fell. A shift in the air. A silence among birds. A smell that came before the storm. Men who noticed these signs prepared. Men who ignored them disappeared. The cold that took everything. Some winters became legendary for their cruelty. The winter of 1886 to 1887 remains one of the deadliest in American history. Snow fell early and never truly stopped. Temperatures dropped far below zero and stayed there for weeks. Cattle froze standing up. Men froze holding reins. Entire ranches were wiped out. Cowboys who survived this winter carried it with them for life. They spoke of it quietly, without drama. They knew winter did not need to be exaggerated. It spoke for itself. Clothing, the quiet science of survival. Cowboy clothing was never accidental. Every piece had a purpose shaped by experience and loss. Wool was sacred. Unlike cotton, wool trapped heat even when wet. A wet cotton shirt could kill a man overnight. Wool could save him. Cowboys layered loosely, never tight. Tight clothing trapped moisture. Loose clothing trapped air. Scarves protected faces from frostbite. Hats protected the neck, one of the fastest places to lose heat. Leather gloves cracked and stiffened in the cold, but bare hands were worse. Men who ignored proper clothing often lost fingers before they lost their lives. Those who survived learned quickly. Pain was a warning. Numbness was danger. The horse, both salvation and risk. A cowboy's horse was his lifeline. But in winter, it was also a responsibility. Horses needed food, water, shelter from wind. A horse that froze meant a man was stranded. A stranded man rarely survived. Cowboys learned to read their animals carefully. A tired horse meant danger. A frightened horse meant a storm was closer than it appeared. Sometimes, cowboys walked beside their horses instead of riding. Sharing warmth. Preserving strength. Winter forced cooperation between man and animal. Those who treated horses as tools lost both the animal and themselves. Fire, the most guarded treasure. Fire was life. Not comfort. Not convenience. Life. A cowboy never allowed fire to fully die. Even embers mattered. Matches were kept dry at all costs. Often stored close to the body. A single spark could mean survival through the night. Without fire, even the strongest man could freeze before morning. Cowboys learned to build fires low to the ground. Protected from wind. Fed slowly. A roaring fire burned out too fast. A steady fire lasted. Winter rewarded patience. Food and the slow body. Winter demanded calories. Cowboys ate heavy, simple food. Beans. Salted meat. Hard bread. Sometimes nothing warm at all. Hunger weakened the body's ability to produce heat. A hungry man froze faster. Cowboys ate even when they didn't feel like it. Especially then. They learned that winter was not the time for comfort. It was the time for routine. Eat. Rest. Move slowly. Repeat. The most dangerous time, night. Night was when winter claimed most lives. Temperatures dropped suddenly after sunset. Wind grew louder. Silence deepened. Men fell asleep and never woke up. Cowboys learned to sleep lightly. Often in short intervals. Waking to check fire. To check horses. To check themselves. They slept with boots nearby. With coats on. Prepared to move if shelter failed. Winter punished carelessness most harshly at night. Why most men failed? The men who died were not stupid. They were unprepared. They trusted confidence over caution. Speed over stillness. Strength over patience. Winter stripped away all illusion. In the West, winter did not care who you were. Only what you knew. Cowboys survived because knowledge replaced bravado. Routine replaced panic. Respect replaced fear. A quiet end to the first chapter. By spring, the snow melted. Bodies were found. Sometimes. Sometimes nothing remained but frozen ground and silence. Cowboys who survived did not celebrate. They simply continued. They knew winter would return. It always did. And as you slowly relax now, breathing gently, remember this truth from the frontier. Winter does not kill quickly. It waits. And only those who learn how to wait with it live to see spring. Blizzard nights and the slow death of panic. How cowboys survived brutal winters that killed most men. Blizzards on the American plains did not announce themselves with thunder. They arrived quietly. At first, the sky simply lost its color. Blue faded into gray. The horizon disappeared, as if the land itself had been erased. Experienced cowboys noticed the silence first. Birds vanished. Wind shifted direction. The air grew heavy, thick, and cold. Then the snow began. It did not fall gently. It moved sideways, driven by wind so strong it burned the skin. Within minutes, visibility vanished. Within hours, the world no longer existed beyond a few feet. This was when most men panicked. And panic was winter's greatest ally. Whiteout, when the land disappeared. A whiteout was not just snow. It was disorientation. Up and down lost meaning. Distance became impossible to judge. Men walked in circles without realizing it. Cowboys learned early that moving blindly during a blizzard was almost always fatal. The wind erased footprints within seconds. Trails vanished. Even familiar land became unrecognizable. Men who believed they could push through often walked until exhaustion forced them to stop. Stopping in open wind meant freezing. Cowboys who survived did something that felt unnatural. They stayed still. They lay down behind whatever shelter they could find. A small rise in the land. A fallen log. The side of a horse. Stillness conserved energy. Stillness reduced exposure. Stillness allowed time to pass. Winter always moved faster than men. Waiting was the only way to let it pass. The psychology of isolation. Winter isolated men in ways no season ever could. Storms cut off all movement. Snow buried landmarks. Sound was swallowed by wind. Cowboys often went days without seeing another human being. Sometimes weeks. Isolation played tricks on the mind. Men spoke to themselves. To horses. To fires. Some heard voices in the wind. Others imagined footsteps where there were none. Fear crept in quietly, especially at night. The men who survived learned to anchor themselves in routine. They checked fire at regular intervals. They fed horses at the same time each day. They ate, even without hunger. Routine kept the mind steady when the world became unrecognizable. The night blizzard. Night storms were the most dangerous. Darkness removed what little orientation daylight provided. Temperatures dropped sharply after sunset. Wind intensified. A man caught outside during a night blizzard often never returned. Cowboys prepared for night storms with discipline. Before sleeping, they reinforced shelters. They secured horses. They stacked fuel within arm's reach. They slept lightly. Never deeply. Deep sleep meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant death. Many cowboys woke every hour, sometimes every 30 minutes. They checked fire. They checked their fingers and toes for numbness. They listened. Listening mattered. Wind had different sounds depending on danger. A rising howl meant worsening conditions. A steady wind meant stability. Winter spoke. Cowboys learned its language. Snow as both enemy and shield. Snow killed men. But it also saved lives. Cowboys learned that packed snow could block wind. Snowbanks became walls. Drifts became shelter. In extreme storms, some men buried themselves partially in snow. It insulated the body, trapping heat. This knowledge was not instinctive. It was learned through loss. Men who feared snow avoided it. Men who understood it survived. Winter demanded adaptation, not resistance. Frostbite, the silent thief. Frostbite did not arrive with pain. It arrived with numbness. Ears. Fingers. Toes. Noses. Skin turned pale. Then white. Then dead. Cowboys learned to recognize frostbite early. They checked each other. They rubbed affected areas gently. Never violently. Violent rubbing destroyed frozen tissue. Many cowboys survived winter but lost parts of themselves. Missing fingers were common. So were damaged ears. These injuries were worn without complaint. They were proof of survival. Horses in the storm. Horses panicked during blizzards. Wind disoriented them. Snow blinded them. Cold weakened them. A spooked horse could run blindly into danger. A collapsed horse meant death for both. Cowboys calmed their animals through touch and voice. They stayed close. They moved slowly. In storms, cowboys often tied themselves to their horses. Not to restrain them, but to stay together if visibility vanished. Man and animal became one unit. Winter did not allow independence. Fire in the wind. Keeping fire alive during a blizzard was an art. Wind extinguished flames instantly if unprotected. Snow smothered embers. Cowboys built fires low. Shielded them with rocks, earth, or saddles. They fed fires slowly, carefully. A small fire lasted longer than a large one. Large fires attracted wind. Small fires survived it. Many men died with matches in their pockets. Fire required more than flame. It required knowledge. The deadly urge to move. The greatest danger during blizzards was the urge to escape. Men believed movement equaled survival. It rarely did. Exhaustion came quickly in deep snow. Sweat froze. Clothing stiffened. Once wet, a man's chances dropped sharply. Cowboys trained themselves to ignore this urge. They waited for breaks in storms. For changes in wind. For silence. Winter always ended storms eventually. Men did not always last long enough to see it. The aftermath of the storm. When blizzards passed, the land looked unfamiliar. Snow reshaped hills. Buried fences. Covered bodies. Cowboys moved cautiously afterward. Weak ice. Hidden holes. Frozen rivers waited beneath snow. Many men died after storms, believing danger had passed. Winter did not end when snow stopped falling. A slow return to quiet. As storms faded, silence returned. A heavy, deep silence. Cowboys listened to it carefully. Silence meant survival. For now. They rebuilt routines. Checked supplies. Counted losses. Winter was not emotional. It did not mourn. It simply continued. #### end of part 2, the wait continues. By the time winter reached its deepest point, cowboys were changed men. Quieter. Slower. More careful. They no longer fought the season. They moved within it. And as you rest now, breathing gently, remember this lesson carved into snow and wind. In the West, winter did not defeat men with violence. It defeated them with impatience. Those who waited lived. The long winter inside the mind. Isolation, hunger, and endurance on the American frontier *. By the time winter reached its deepest point, the storms were no longer the greatest danger. The silence was. Snow covered the land for weeks without melting. Days blended together. The sun rose weakly and disappeared early. Cowboys measured time differently in winter. Not by dates. But by meals. By storms. By how long the fire lasted through the night. The world shrank to whatever lay within arm's reach. Fire. Food. Shelter. And the slow rhythm of breathing. This was when winter truly tested men. The loss of time. During long winters, time lost its meaning. Cowboys woke without urgency. There was nowhere to go. No trail to follow. No work that could be rushed. Men who tried to keep summer habits failed. Winter demanded slowness. Those who survived accepted this new pace. They slept more. They moved less. They conserved energy as if it were fuel. Energy wasted in winter could never be replaced. Hunger that never left. Food was constant concern. Supplies ran low. Fresh meat vanished early in the season. What remained was salted, dried, or frozen. Cowboys ate the same meals day after day. Beans. Hard bread. Fat when available. Hunger was not sharp. It was dull and constant. A background ache that weakened the body and clouded the mind. Men learned to eat slowly. To chew carefully. To make meals last longer than they should. A man who ate too quickly felt warmer for a moment. Then colder than before. Winter punished impatience even at the table. The body slows down. Cold changed the body. Muscles stiffened. Joints ached. Movement required effort. Cowboys learned to warm themselves gradually. Sudden movement caused pain and injury. They stretched slowly near fire. They rubbed hands together gently. They waited for blood to return before standing. Many men ignored this. They stood too quickly. They slipped. They fell. In winter, a fall could mean broken bones. Broken bones meant death. Carefulness became instinct. The mind in isolation. Isolation altered thoughts. Cowboys spent long hours alone with nothing but wind and fire for company. Some spoke aloud just to hear a human voice. Others sang quietly. Some stayed silent for days. Memories surfaced uninvited. Regrets. Faces from the past. Winter gave men too much time to think. The men who survived learned not to fight these thoughts. They let them pass like storms. Fighting the mind caused exhaustion. Acceptance preserved strength. Sleep in short waves. Sleep during winter was never deep. Cowboys slept in layers of clothing. Often sitting rather than lying down. They woke frequently. Sometimes from cold. Sometimes from silence. Each awakening served a purpose. Check fire. Check limbs. Check breathing. Men who slept too deeply sometimes never woke. Light sleep kept the body alert without draining it. Winter taught men how to rest without surrendering. Loneliness and connection. Loneliness pressed heavily during winter months. Human contact was rare. Letters stopped arriving. News faded. When cowboys met another person during winter, conversations were brief but meaningful. Words were few. Gestures mattered more. Sharing food. Sharing fire. Sharing silence. These moments carried men through weeks of isolation. Winter taught the value of presence without speech. The role of small rituals. Rituals anchored the mind. Cowboys cleaned tools even when they wouldn't be used. They repaired gear repeatedly. They arranged supplies in familiar order. These acts were not practical. They were psychological. Routine reminded men they still existed within time. Without ritual, days blurred into nothing. Winter erased the careless. Routine preserved the mindful. Fear that arrived at dusk. Fear often came at dusk. As light faded, uncertainty grew. Would the fire last? Would supplies run out? Would another storm come tonight? Cowboys acknowledged these fears without feeding them. They prepared. They planned. Then they rested. Worry did not keep men alive. Preparation did. The sound of survival. Cowboys listened constantly. The crack of ice. The shift of wind. The breathing of horses. Sound replaced sight in winter. Silence meant stability. Sudden noise meant danger. Men who learned to listen survived longer than those who relied on sight. When winter broke men, not all survived the mental strain. Some wandered off. Some gave up routine. Some stopped eating. These men often died quietly. Winter did not rage against them. It simply waited. The cowboys who survived stayed present. One moment at a time. One breath at a time. The slow acceptance. Eventually, something shifted. Winter stopped feeling temporary. It became the world. Cowboys who reached this stage were the most likely to survive. Acceptance removed fear. Fear wasted energy. Winter did not end quickly. But it always ended eventually.
Shelter, snow, and the art of staying still. How cowboys learned to live inside winter *. By the heart of winter, movement became rare. Survival depended not on where a man could go, but on where he could stay. Cowboys learned that shelter was not something you searched for during winter. It was something you built slowly, carefully, and often imperfectly. Perfect shelter did not exist. Only shelter that was good enough. And in winter, good enough meant life. The myth of the cabin. Many men believed a wooden cabin guaranteed safety. Winter proved otherwise. Cabins leaked wind. Gaps between logs breathed cold air. Roofs collapsed under heavy snow. A poorly built cabin could be colder than the open plains. Cowboys learned to improve shelters rather than abandon them. They sealed cracks with mud, cloth, and snow. They lowered ceilings to trap heat. They blocked and used doors and windows. A smaller space meant warmer air. Winter taught efficiency. Dugouts and earth shelters. Some of the safest winter shelters were underground. Cowboys dug into hillsides or riverbanks. These dugouts used the earth itself as insulation. The ground temperature stayed stable even when air temperatures dropped dangerously low. Inside dugouts, wind disappeared. Sound softened. Fire burned steadily. These shelters were dark. Cramped. Often damp. But they saved lives. Men who accepted discomfort survived longer than those who chased comfort. Snow as a building material. Snow was not just something to escape from. It was something to use. Cowboys packed snow against walls to block wind. They shaped drifts into barriers. They reinforced weak points with frozen layers. Packed snow became solid, almost like stone. In extreme cases, cowboys carved temporary shelters directly into snowbanks. These spaces trapped heat efficiently.
Fear of snow disappeared once its properties were understood. Winter rewarded knowledge. Inside the shelter. Shelter interiors were simple. Fire near the center. Supplies stacked along walls. Sleeping areas raised off the ground when possible. The ground stole heat quickly. Even a few inches of elevation mattered. Cowboys used saddles, blankets, wood, or brush as insulation beneath them. They slept close to fire but not too close. Fire provided warmth. It also brought risk. Balance was everything. Managing smoke and air. Smoke killed silently. Shelters needed ventilation, even in extreme cold. Cowboys left small openings near the roof. Just enough to let smoke escape. Too much ventilation invited cold air. Too little invited suffocation. This balance was learned through experience, often costly. Winter punished mistakes immediately. Fire control inside shelter. Indoor fires required discipline. Large fires overheated spaces quickly, then burned out. Small fires lasted longer. Cowboys fed fires slowly. They planned burn cycles around sleep. They positioned fuel within reach. No sudden movement was required during the night. Fire management became routine. Routine meant survival. Living with darkness. Winter days were short. Nights were long. Shelters were dark even during daylight hours. Cowboys adjusted. They worked near firelight. They rested when light faded. Forcing productivity wasted energy. Winter demanded alignment with nature's rhythm. The sound of safety. Inside shelter, sound mattered. The crack of burning wood meant warmth. The howl of wind outside meant protection. If wind became louder inside than outside, shelter had failed. Cowboys listened constantly. Sound told them when to reinforce walls. When snow needed to be packed again. When danger approached. Shelter was not static. It required attention. Sharing space. During winter, cowboys shared shelters whenever possible. Privacy disappeared. Warmth mattered more. Men slept close. They coordinated movements. They shared responsibilities. Conflict wasted energy. Winter punished those who refused cooperation. When shelter failed. No shelter lasted forever. Snow shifted. Wind changed direction. Firewood ran out. Cowboys prepared for failure. They kept gear organized. They knew exit paths. They planned alternatives. Preparation reduced panic. Panic destroyed men faster than cold. Stillness as strategy. The safest shelters were often the ones where men moved least. Every movement invited heat loss. Every opening let cold inside. Cowboys learned to stay still for long periods. Stillness became comfort. Winter transformed patience into strength. Food, firewood, and the math of staying alive. How cowboys learned to measure winter in calories and flame asterisk. By the middle of winter, survival was no longer about strength. It was about arithmetic. Every movement cost energy. Every fire consumed fuel. Every meal reduced supplies. Cowboys learned to calculate life carefully. Winter did not reward generosity or waste. It rewarded precision. The value of firewood. Firewood was not just fuel. It was time. Each piece represented warmth that could not be replaced once burned. Cowboys gathered wood early in the season. Before snow buried it. Before travel became dangerous. They stacked it carefully. Off the ground. Covered when possible. Wet wood smoked. Smoke wasted heat. Dry wood burned slow and clean. Cowboys learned to ration fire, not maximize it. Burning less to live longer. A large fire felt comforting. It also burned out quickly. Cowboys preferred small, controlled fires. They adjusted flames according to weather. Calm nights needed less heat. Storm nights required more. Fire became a measured resource, not an emotional one. Men who burned firewood for comfort often ran out too soon. Winter did not care how cold a man felt today. Only whether he could survive tomorrow. Food as fuel, not pleasure. Food lost all romance in winter. There was no variety. No choice. Only availability. Beans provided protein and calories. Salted meat provided fat. Fat mattered most. Fat burned slowly inside the body, producing warmth. Cowboys craved fat during winter without understanding why. The body knew before the mind did. Meals were small but regular. Eating too much at once caused drowsiness. Drowsiness invited deep sleep. Deep sleep invited danger. Winter demanded steady energy, not spikes. The art of stretching supplies. Cowboys learned to stretch food creatively. Bones were boiled repeatedly for nutrients. Fat was saved, never discarded. Crumbs mattered. Nothing edible was wasted. Scarcity sharpened awareness. Men who wasted food early in winter often starved later. Winter kept no record of past meals. Hunting in winter. Hunting was difficult. Animals migrated or hid. Snow revealed tracks but slowed pursuit. Cowboys hunted cautiously. Energy spent hunting had to be worth the calories gained. A failed hunt wasted precious strength. Often, cowboys chose not to hunt at all. Survival meant knowing when effort was too costly. Water, the hidden danger. Water was everywhere in winter. And often inaccessible. Streams froze. Snow had to be melted. Melting snow required fire. Fire required wood. Everything connected. Cowboys melted snow slowly. Too fast, and containers cracked. Too slow, and fire wasted heat. Cold water lowered body temperature dangerously. Cowboys drank sparingly, but regularly. Dehydration worsened cold injury. Winter punished imbalance. The slow economy of energy. Every action was weighed. Should the fire be fed now, or later? Should the meal be eaten fully, or saved? Should the body move, or remain still? Cowboys lived inside these calculations daily. The men who survived winter were those who spent less energy than they consumed. Simple math. Harsh consequences. Cooking as survival. Cooking warmed shelters briefly. It also consumed fuel. Cowboys cooked efficiently. One pot. One flame. No waste. They often cooked once per day, saving leftovers for later. Hot food raised body temperature temporarily. Timing mattered. Meals were eaten before rest. Never before exposure. Winter punished poor timing. Sharing and trust. When multiple cowboys shared a shelter, food required trust. Supplies were counted. Rations agreed upon. Conflict over food destroyed groups. Winter forced cooperation. Men who hoarded often starved alone. Survival favored those who shared responsibly. The sound of empty supplies. As winter dragged on, supplies dwindled. Firewood stacks shrank. Food bags lightened. Cowboys learned to accept this without panic. Panic caused poor decisions. They adjusted routines. They reduced fires. They slept longer. Slower living stretched remaining resources. When supplies ran out. Some winters lasted longer than planned. When supplies ran low, cowboys relied on discipline. They ate less. They moved less. They waited more. Waiting cost nothing. Winter always ended eventually. The men who lasted longest were those who waited best. Together or gone. Community, trust, and why lone men rarely survived winter asterisk. As winter stretched on, cowboys learned a truth that many men discovered too late. The West was not survived alone. Cold did not just attack the body. It attacked isolation. Men who tried to endure winter by themselves often disappeared quietly. No struggle. No noise. Just absence. Cowboys who survived understood that survival was shared. The limits of individual strength. Strength mattered less in winter than cooperation. A strong man could gather firewood faster. But he could not watch fire, horses, and supplies at the same time. Fatigue set in quickly. One mistake. One missed signal. And winter took advantage.
Cowboys learned that dividing responsibility preserved life. The unwritten rules of winter groups. Winter groups formed naturally. 2 or 3 men shared shelter. Supplies were pooled. Tasks were divided. These groups operated on unspoken rules. No waste. No hoarding. No unnecessary movement. Breaking these rules endangered everyone. Winter punished selfishness immediately. Watching each other. Cold dulled awareness. Frostbite often went unnoticed by the person experiencing it. Cowboys checked each other regularly. Hands. Ears. Faces. A simple touch could prevent permanent injury. Alone, a man could lose fingers without realizing it. Together, damage was caught early. Shared fire, shared life. Fire was rarely tended by one person. While one slept, another watched flames. This rotation allowed rest without risk. Cowboys trusted each other with life itself. Trust replaced fear. Horses and group survival. Caring for horses required multiple hands. Water had to be melted. Food rationed. Shelter maintained. Groups shared horse duties. If one man weakened, another compensated. Winter demanded flexibility. Rigid men broke. Adaptable groups survived. Conflict in cold. Conflict wasted energy. Arguments raised heart rates. Raised heart rates caused sweating. Sweat froze. Cowboys avoided unnecessary confrontation. Silence resolved more than words. Men who carried anger often carried it into death. Winter did not forgive emotional excess. The quiet language of trust. Winter groups spoke less. Communication was efficient. A glance. A nod. A movement toward the fire. Too much talking invited mistakes. Trust replaced explanation. When groups failed. Not all groups survived. Some fell apart under hunger. Others under fear. When trust broke, winter rushed in. Men who left groups rarely lived long. Isolation returned quickly. Help from strangers. In winter, strangers often became allies. Shelter was offered without questions.
Food shared carefully. The West had its own winter code. Survival mattered more than history. Why lone men died? Lone men had no one to watch them sleep. No one to notice frostbite. No one to share fire duty. Mistakes went unnoticed. Winter exploited solitude. A different kind of brotherhood. Cowboys formed bonds not through stories, but through silence shared during storms. These bonds lasted beyond winter. Men remembered who kept the fire alive. Trust earned in winter was permanent. When the snow let go. The end of winter and the men who remained asterisk. Winter did not end suddenly. There was no announcement. No clear moment when danger disappeared. It loosened its grip slowly. The wind softened. Snow began to sink instead of harden. Ice cracked gently rather than snapping. Cowboys noticed the change before they understood it. Something in the air felt lighter. The first signs of spring. The sun rose a little higher each day. Light lingered longer in the evening. Snow no longer screamed beneath boots. It sighed. Water appeared where ice once ruled. Slow. Cold. Alive. Cowboys moved carefully during this time. Spring was not safety. It was transition. Many men died during the thaw, believing winter had ended. The danger of melt. Melting snow hid dangers. Weak ice collapsed under weight. Flooded ground swallowed boots. Cold water drained heat faster than air. Cowboys respected the thaw. They moved slowly. They tested ground before trusting it. Winter did not leave without one last lesson. Counting the cost. As snow retreated, losses became visible. Frozen cattle emerged from drifts. Broken shelters leaned. Abandoned camps appeared. Sometimes, bodies were found. Sometimes, nothing remained. Cowboys did not linger. Winter taught them that grief wasted strength. They remembered quietly. The men who survived. The men who survived winter were changed. They spoke less. Moved slower. Listened more. Confidence was replaced by awareness. They no longer underestimated the land. Winter stripped away arrogance and left respect. The land after winter. The plains looked empty after winter. Clean. Silent. Unforgiving. But beneath the surface, life waited. Grass returned slowly. Animals followed. Work resumed. Cowboys did not rush. Winter patience remained inside them. A different kind of strength. Survival did not make cowboys fearless. It made them careful. They trusted routine. They trusted silence. They trusted each other. Winter did not create heroes. It removed pretenders. Why most men never returned. Many men left the West after one winter. They returned east. Or disappeared into history. They learned what the land demanded. And chose not to pay the price. Cowboys stayed because they accepted it. Acceptance was the final lesson. Memory and quiet legacy. Cowboys did not write much about winter. Their stories were short. Often unfinished. Winter did not fit neatly into words. It lived in pauses. In missing fingers. In long stares into fire. The cycle continues. Spring led to summer. Summer to fall. Cowboys prepared again. They stacked wood earlier. They repaired shelters. They remembered. Winter always returned. Prepared men survived again. The final truth of the frontier. The West was not won by violence. It was endured. Not by the strongest. Not by the fastest. But by those who learned how to wait. Final rest, sleeping history ending. And now, as your breathing slows. As your thoughts soften and fade. Remember this quiet truth carried across frozen plains. Winter never needed to be defeated. It only needed to be understood. Those who listened lived. Those who rushed were forgotten. Sleep peacefully. The fire is steady. The storm has passed.